Welcome to the first official VOA Urdu Town Hall from Washington. This event is in association with IOBM, Institute of Business Management Sciences in Pakistan, and Voice of America and Nucleus Media Group. It's going to be a very interesting show. We have guests here in Washington, and then we have a panel in Pakistan. Let me quickly introduce my panel here in Washington. To my right is Patrick Butler, who is VP Programs for ICFJ, and next to him is Matthew Bays, who's the Digital Director for Voice of America. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
And in Pakistan is Shahbaz Siddiqui, who is the founder of Media Psychology Research Center in Pakistan, and is also the CEO of Nucleus Media Group. Shahbaz, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, hello everyone. Welcome to IOBM. Right now we are broadcasting from IOBM Verve Studios here in Karachi. And with me I've got three very distinguished panelists. On my left it's Owais Mangalwala. He represents Express News Network. He's a producer, and he produces current affairs and also digital content. Next to him is Mr. Owais Jaffer. He's the editor multimedia. He looks after the digital assets of Geo News, and as well as all the portals and whatnot. And on the third, last but not the least, we've got Mr. Ajaz Wase, who's the HOD, Head of Department of Media Sciences, and a Senior Fellow in Marketing at IOBM. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And I would like to also welcome our guests over here, our students of IOBM. I would like to thank for their participation. And some of them are really, Imran, they're very eager to talk to our panelists in Washington, D.C., as well as our panelists over here. So over to you, Imran.
Well, on behalf of Voice of America, I thank you all for being a part of this amazing event. This is the first in a series of events, especially to the students and to your guests. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I'd like to start off by asking Matthew Bays, the Digital Director for VOA, what is digital engagement or digital journalism in the U.S., and how have you seen it grow over the couple of years?
Well, starting back in the late 90s, it's really created an earthquake for American journalism. It's caused audience to grow very quickly, so we had a new platform that newspapers and radio stations and television stations could reach new audiences. But it was catastrophic to the revenue model, especially for newspapers. American newspapers many of them are starting to lose money. They're being shut down in many cases, and it's not for lack of audience. The audience loves getting a product on this new platform, but you can only make pennies on the dollar on your advertising, and so without the advertising to support your journalism, you end up with smaller newsrooms. So it's led to some pretty significant cutbacks in American journalism.
Has it also increased opportunities for the younger generation to come and report on issues that they think are for them?
Significantly. I mean, if you think historically, how would you get into journalism? If you wanted to start up a television station or a radio station or a newspaper, you had to have millions of dollars in capital to be able to do that. So the barriers to entry have completely disintegrated. So at the same time that it's been very challenging for established news organizations, anyone who decides that they want to go out and practice journalism, it's very easy to reach mass audiences. As long as you're interesting and you have something to say that people care about, it's much easier to get into journalism now.
Robert, you've been to Pakistan. ICFJ just helped set up a media center over there.
That's right.
Now, tell us a little bit about that. One of the issues that we come across in Pakistan is that people report on issues, but there's always a concern about sourcing. You can hear something on some kind of a social media platform or digital platform, and people think that this is the authentic way to report. Tell us a little bit about how do you see digital journalism growing in Pakistan, and what would be the challenges involved with that?
Well, Pakistani media are not quite in the same situation that Matthew described U.S. media being in, partly because internet penetration is not as high there as it is in the United States. The revenue model hasn't changed as much. Newspapers are still doing pretty well in circulation in Pakistan. But I do go there fairly frequently. I was just there in October, and I think there's a real recognition among Pakistani media leaders and journalists that the kinds of changes that we've seen here in the United States and other parts of the world are coming to Pakistan. And so Pakistani media need to be ready for it. We did our first training, as you mentioned, at the Center for Excellence in Journalism on multimedia journalism, going out and shooting stories with a simple mobile phone that are really TV quality stories. journalists are hungry for this kind of training. The other interesting thing about Pakistan is that because internet penetration is not as high, I think we're seeing, as in many other parts of the world, leapfrogging the sort of laptops and desktop computers and going right to mobile journalism, right to mobile news delivery, which we're seeing, of course, in the United States as well. But in Pakistan, I think it's going to be much more rapid.
Absolutely. You're pointing towards that there's more cell phone consumption in Pakistan than internet usage. So
That's right.
the trend would be towards cell phones. Shahbaz, you heard what our panelists had to say from Washington. Now over to you in Pakistan.
Well, I'd like to make a comment based on your panelists over there. What I heard from them is that the transition from analog to digital in America was based on the cost factors. So I would like to pose this, taking this the discussion onwards. I would like to ask a question with Mr. Owais Jaffer, who looks after the digital content and GeoNews. As you listen to the panelists over there, the cost factor was the main thing. Was that the case in terms of what you're doing at Geo?
No, exactly opposite. Because like they already said, it's not the same situation in Pakistan. Internet penetration isn't as high as it is in the US, and TV is still king at the moment. And I'm sure everybody will agree. If a news story goes on television, the reach is going to increase. No matter, yes, there are newspapers here, Urdu and English, which have a wide penetration across Pakistan, but it's not as high as television. So it wasn't the cost factor, but it was the new technology that's coming, and we're ready to embrace it. So it was mostly just that, and that's the reason the news flow that we're following in Pakistan is probably very different from what they're following abroad, especially in the States.
As far as the GeoNews multimedia content portal is concerned, you have an app now as well. You can watch live TV, you can watch recorded programming. But if as per your analysis, the viewership of those digital content, is it mostly from Pakistan, or you see a Pakistani diaspora accessing that?
We've got the Pakistani diaspora all over the world that's checking into it, but yes, the majority is still from within Pakistan right now. And as the panelists in Washington were talking about the difference in internet usage in Pakistan as opposed to the number of people using it through the cell phones, that picture is absolutely true, because if you look at the GeoNews website that we have, I get about 4.5 million sessions per month. Not page views, but sessions. But if we compare that to the GeoNews mobile app, that's 25 million. So it's 5 times more than that. So again, the day 3G and 4G are affordable for our people in Pakistan, the game is going to change. I don't think people are going to watch TV anymore.
I was looking at some report by Google in Pakistan, and predicting that in 2014, which is going on right now, there will be a big transition from desktop or laptop-based internet usage and transition towards internet access through mobile.
I think for that to happen, the entities that are serving those users, for example, the websites, they will have to modify themselves, because right now in Pakistan, many of the websites that you're using, they're not ready to be used, or as in they don't adapt to different devices. Maybe if you're using it on one sort of tablet, it's going to work absolutely fine. The user experience is going to be fine. But the minute you shift the operating system, you're going to be left scratching your head. So when that happens, this boom is going to take place.
Awais, your group, Express News, and surprisingly, you guys are sitting together. They're opposing ends in Pakistan. As you can see, there's a media rivalry between different media networks as well. Coming back to the Express is also has a newspaper, which is Express Tribune, and is an affiliate of New York Times in Pakistan. And recently, the Tribune, the Express Tribune, and that Pakistani version of New York Times how's it doing in terms of the digital side of it? Is it been getting a lot of viewership and audience impressions?
It's doing very good in terms of numbers, and we experience almost the same number as Owais highlighted for his media. In fact, his number was pretty higher a few months ago.
Yes, we have seen a slump. Yes,
yeah.
But that's across the industry that we've seen.
That is not because of Express going up or something else. But we've got good numbers, and especially when it comes to our websites of Tribune, or we've got the Express.pk Urdu website, we've got millions of views on daily basis. We've got viewers from all over the world.
So in terms of the sort of usage of these websites, so you think that there's a growth factor associated with that? You
Yes,
feel
there
that
is a certain growth factor.
Okay, coming back to Mr. Ijaz Saab, I'm going to pose you a little different question to you.
Sure.
Digital usage, media usage in the universities. You represent IOBM University. You represent the Media Sciences Department. So the students are invariably using digital media as a source of their projects, their assignments. So you feel that they realize that there is a whole aspect of verification associated, or they just, since it's on digital media, they think it's authentic and they're using it. So what's your opinion on that?
See, my feel is that there is definitely an awareness of the fact that whatever information they're getting on the net is not all authentic. People do know. I think these young lads are quite clever. Thing is, how do they analyze it? How do they take advantage of it? Because there's tremendous amount of information which is very usable, very good, and that is why we don't discourage them from using internet as a source of information for the assignments, for the projects, etc. And then to back it up, of course, we've got softwares that can verify where the information comes from, whether they've actually paraphrased it or they've just copied it from somewhere. So they know for a fact that we've got software in the university which is accessible to them as well. They can check out their assignments and see how much of my material is copied from somewhere else. And it's all very precise, so they are exactly, they know that they will be caught if they go the wrong way.
I would like to jump in there, if you may allow me, Shahbaz, because there was an important point mentioned by Mr. Ijaz here.
Sure.
Yeah, please go ahead.
And I'd like to bounce off to my panelists here on this important question about plagiarism. Matthew, in this digital age, we've seen cases of plagiarism. People pick up stuff written by other people and start to promote that as their own. How can a young journalist keep that in mind, considering that there's so much of data coming in a breaking news situation, and people think that whatever they see on Twitter or Facebook might be the facts? How can a young journalist cut through the clutter and get to the source of the story?
Well, if I understand your question, so the first part was about this issue of plagiarism, and the second about how do you source adequately. Even though the technology has changed significantly, we have access to far more sources, to people who are potentially on the scene or people who are who have some firsthand experience with what's going on in a breaking news situation. The rules really haven't changed. I mean, the technology is a little bit different, so there are dozens of techniques that you can use to try to verify information and make sure that it's accurate. But the sort of the underlying principles haven't really changed that much in the last 100 years. There's an old joke in American journalism that says if your mother tells you she loves you, check it out, and you don't ever trust anything. And it's the same. It's the same in this situation. So, without taking up too much time on it, you can look at the geolocation of someone's tweets. You can there are ways to check and see if a photo has been faked. You can look at the EXIF data, which we regularly do here. It's called digital forensics. So when someone submits video to you, we went through a whole series of verifications on some video that was given to one of our reporters in northern Nigeria a few months ago. And we stripped out the EXIF data. We looked at the vegetation in the background to see if it matched that part of the country for that time of the year. It pays to be skeptical.
Okay, and Patrick, what we usually do here is that we hear something on any of the social platforms. We either confirm it with our reporters on the ground, or we talk to our affiliate who have reporters on the ground, or we check other authentic outlets that provide information and sources, and then wait for it not to be a part of the breaking, who's going to be the first one to report that, but we want to be the first ones who are reporting it accurately. What has been your experience in giving these training sessions in Pakistan. Is that a challenge in Pakistan?
It's a challenge in Pakistan just as it is here. There have certainly been incidents in Pakistan where things have been reported too quickly before the information was verified. We've had them here as well. The Boston Marathon bombing was one example of that. But I think one of the things that journalists need to do is to learn how to crowdsource information that they get on, some of what Matthew was talking about, how media organizations can verify information. They can also use the crowd, to put information out there and to get information from the public through Twitter or Facebook about, information that they want to verify. Many times people out in the community have lots of information that is useful for media organizations to use, and it's a way of verifying information. The other part of it is the consuming public needs to understand how they can evaluate the veracity of sources of information. So there are whole movements of what's called media literacy, which is educating students at universities, at high schools, and the general public at large about how do you evaluate all these this myriad sources of information that are coming at us now, much more than we ever had before. How do you evaluate, how do you decide which sources are accurate, which ones you can trust? And that's something I haven't seen yet in Pakistan that would be a good idea for Pakistani universities to adapt.
Imran, I have one of the panelists who's eager to sort of respond to this comment, and should I go ahead?
Please do.
Okay. We have, while Patrick was talking about his part, Mr. Uwais Jafar over here was writing a lot on his paper. I would like to ask him what was the thing that you were.
Especially when he mentioned that we are in a race to report, and sometimes we don't wait for verifying the facts. That happens in Pakistan a lot, and sometimes entities, organizations pay dearly for it. And I'm sure the journalists would understand what I'm talking about. Not going to get into it, but yes, there are lots of ways that we need to follow. I'm going to agree with Matthew that the thing hasn't changed. The same rules apply. Technology might have changed, but to verify the content that you're getting is very important.
A lot of the questions come to us at voaurdu.com with regards to why don't you report this, why don't you report that? For example, if something would happen in Pakistan and we have people on the ground, but if it's difficult to report on that, or we wait and take our time on reporting on the issue, we get a lot of queries from Pakistan that why were you late, why didn't you do it, you reported it, everyone's reporting it, why haven't you reported on that? What do you do in a circumstance like that?
Well, it's a balancing act. You want to be accurate, and your credibility depends on accuracy. If people see that you're reporting false information because you jumped too quickly, they're not going to believe you next time. So, but on the other hand, let's be honest, journalists want the scoop. We want to be first. So it's understandable that we would try to get the information as soon as possible. So one thing that a lot of media organizations do is to say that sources are telling us, and we haven't verified this yet. So it's a way of letting the public know that we're not sure about this, but we want you to know that this is a possibility. But there's a danger in that, because then when you have to go back later and say, oh, turns out our sources were wrong, then you lose some credibility.
And Matthew, this is like on both sides of the continent. It's happening in the US and happening in other parts of the world. But we have a saying, if you have a doubt, take it out. What would you say to that?
Well, you don't report it in the first place if you can't confirm it. One of the ways around that, so it's a challenge for us here in that we don't always have assets on the ground in the countries that we are reporting for. And in some of those cases, you can do roundups of what other news outlets are reporting. So you can go through and put together a storify using Twitter, or you can do some re-reporting off of other news outlets. But I think it's critical, like you said, to put it in the mouth of those parties, to say that this news organization is reporting that X has happened, but you don't ever say it for yourself. And I've actually gone in at some points when I was working on English Web, and people were asking, why aren't you putting details in the story? And I've actually gone in as the editor and said, because we don't know. You literally are reading everything we know right now. We're working to confirm the following details. I know that other news outlets have said that this is happening, but yeah, I think it's basic. You only say what you know, and anything up until that point, if you overreach you're going to lose credibility. But the thing is that tension will never go away. As long as someone has been repeating information to someone else, there's always been that fundamental tension between, do I hold back and then I'm late and people don't pay attention to me? Or do I jump ahead and say something that I haven't really sourced properly and then I lose my credibility? And you have to constantly renegotiate that territory.
And I'm sure in Pakistan there's a lot of competition going on because you've got so many networks and people will want to be the first. But to your students in Pakistan, I would say that it's better to be right than to be early and wrong. So I would suggest take your time with your sourcing, get the facts right, and then report on the story.
Every day you see every channel claiming that we were the first ones to give this news out, and the difference may be 3 seconds or 4 seconds, but they are posting about it. They are just telling the viewers that we were the first ones, which makes no difference at all. If the time consumed by another channel it's just 3 seconds later than your channel. See the death toll presented in any emergency event. It's always confusing. One channel is reporting 10 dead, the other one may be reporting 15 dead.
Okay.
I'd like to pick up the point that Patrick Butler was making about the students and what they need to do and how the curriculum should be designed. I think he's got a very valid point because he's been here, he knows what the environment is like. Point is that yes, that is, we truly recognize the need to inculcate these basic disciplines in our students at this stage. And we go through the curriculum. If somebody wants to look through the curriculum, there is ample amount of effort being put into not only familiarize them with what kind of environment that we work in and what kind of risks they'll have to take, what kind of exposures they'll have to be careful about, but their own reputation being at stake, their own, if they really want to be good journalists, they've got to follow certain norms, certain principles, which may cause them to work require them to work a little harder, but at least in the end, they would come out flying because that's precisely what you want.
Okay, Imran, now I want to turn towards my eagerly listening students who are in the audience.
That's fantastic. Let's do that.
And they're like brimming with questions. But since we have limited time, we have 3 or 4 questions.
I'm sure the students must be listening and wondering what's going on, so let's open the mic.
Yeah, so the whole idea, if you remember, that we talked about was the reason behind this project was to involve the students.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes, so let's do it.
Yeah, so one of the first questions is lady sitting right here. Name yourself and tell us about what you do over here, and then ask your question.
Hello, my name is Ikra, and I am a media student here at IOBM. And my question is basically, as you can see, not just in Pakistan, but basically in the entire world, there has been an increase in the usage of digital media. While there are obvious benefits of this increase in the usage of digital media, don't you think that this has led to us losing touch with the human side of our personality?
Yeah, over to you guys in America.
Can you repeat that
Yeah,
question?
so the question is that because of this engagement with digital platforms, don't you think we've kind of lost touch with traditional journalism?
Well, there is that danger, certainly. There's a lot of opportunity in the digital innovation field. We can bring people into bringing news into our media that were never able to be sources before. The public, for example, we can use Twitter and Facebook in really exciting ways to engage audiences. But we also have to make sure that we don't lose the value of traditional journalism, in-depth, investigative reporting, for example. That's the kind of thing that is hard to do in a short Twitter bite of 140 characters or a Facebook posting. We have to make sure that we're not taking away resources from the quality, investigative, in-depth journalism that is the hallmark of quality journalism. So that is a concern.
Matthew?
I think as long as you preserve the values that have informed journalism on traditional platforms, it doesn't lose value, it actually gains value, because if you still hew to those same principles, but you have the opportunity to talk one-on-one and directly to your audience, that you have the ability instantaneously to communicate with any members of your audience, or to go out and source stories that otherwise you would have had to have sent someone out, that you can pull in videos and photo, but everybody is walking around with a camera in their pocket. Now, I think that this actually, if we're careful about it and we're smart, it will lead to improvements in journalism, and it will lead to a better style of journalism. But because we're still working this out, and I think there is a tendency to go for the cheap win. Sometimes there's a tendency to get desperate to get your page views up on your website or to say something to grab people's attention, and that's where you see the mistakes happening. So as long as we don't get greedy and stupid, and this happens in the United States too, it is not unique to Pakistan, that you can, in desperation to get those numbers up just a little bit, you can do something foolish. As long as we're careful about that, I think you'll see an overall improvement in the quality of journalism.
All right, Shahbaz, we have time for one more question, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Okay, one more question.
Hello, my name is Kainat, and I'm here studying media studies. The question I have is, a new form of social intimacy is emerging, one in which people have closeness without permanence, depth without commitment, and one never feels the need to identify a person on a level. So, as being a student and an individual of the society, I'm curious about this factor. What would you like to comment on it?
Oh, a new form of social intimacy is emerging where you don't see people face to face and yet you report on stuff.
Yes, like closeness without permanence and depth without commitment.
Without commitment, without knowing who's on the other side, you're losing that touch where people would go and actually interview people and then get to the facts. What would you say to them?
You know, we should never give up what we call shoe leather journalism, which is being out on the street, meeting people, finding the story, and talking to people face to face. It is tempting with the digital media, with email, with direct messages on Twitter, to do all our interviews on the computer instead of being out and we never leave the newsroom, and that's a real danger. I think it's very important for journalists to maintain that, getting out on the street, talking to people one-on-one. It's difficult because especially in the traffic in Karachi, which I know very well, it can take hours to get to where you're trying to get to. But it's important that we not give that up, because that is our value as journalists, is to really be the voice of the people, and we can't be that if we're not out on the streets talking to people.
Matthew, one-liner answer.
Yeah. Don't let the technology dehumanize you. You still have to get out and talk to people when you can.
All right. Unfortunately, I apologize, we're running out of time, but we would like to thank everyone in Pakistan who took out the time, your panelist Shahbaz, and your students, and I'd like to thank the panel in Washington at VOA Studio. But we hope to continue this session and to be able to provide answers that your students might have. So look forward to more of these coming soon. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us.
Thank you, Imran. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Matthew. And thank you to our three panelists over here. Thank you for coming, and most of all, thank you to Imran Siddiqui, as well as the students over here. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us. Hope to see you again soon.